most feared warriors bring their most precious treasure, not to a fortress but to a hospital on Mars, not for conquest, but to beg for help. These aren't invaders. They're desperate parents, and the only ones who can save their young. Humans. Ordinary, compassionate humans. This one act of kindness will shake the stars. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and show us a thumbs up by liking the video. Now, let's move toward this wonderful story that proves sometimes the smallest touch can change the fate of an entire galaxy. Daniel Mora rubbed his tired eyes and leaned back in his chair. The soft hum of the interstellar pediatric unit filled the air, mixing with the gentle beeping of monitors. It was nearly midnight on Mars's orbital hub, and the last patient, a young Therian child recovering from gravity adaptation, had just fallen asleep. Daniel stood slowly, stretching his arms, ready to call it a night. As a pediatric nurse working in one of the most advanced hospitals in the United Earth Alliance, he had seen many strange things, but tonight felt different somehow. He couldn't shake a feeling deep in his chest, a strange mix of nerves and expectation. Just as he reached for his data tablet to log out, the overhead lights flickered, and a harsh siren echoed through the corridors. Red strobes began flashing across the ceiling. Daniel froze. This wasn't the usual medical code. A voice crackled over the intercom, tense and unfamiliar. Emergency docking procedure in progress. Unscheduled alien vessel approaching. Medical personnel standby. All. Security to Bay 4 immediately. Daniel's heart jumped. Bay 4? That was 2 levels down. Close to the diplomatic port, but also dangerously isolated. He wasn't part of the emergency team, but his legs were already moving. Years of training kicked in. Emergencies meant someone might need help. And someone, needing help, that was his reason for showing up every day. He stepped into the elevator as a pair of armed security guards brushed past him, eyes sharp and focused. One stopped briefly. Medical staff should stay clear. Unknown threat. I'm a pediatric nurse, Daniel replied quickly, flashing his ID badge. If someone needs care, I'm going with you. The guard hesitated, then gave a brief nod. Fine, stay behind us, no hero stuff. The elevator doors opened onto a corridor buzzing with tension. Personnel moved briskly, shouting commands and scanning the massive bay doors ahead. Daniel's eyes locked on the alien ship visible through reinforced glass. It hovered in the docking cradle like a beast of metal and shadows. The vessel was dark, almost black, its surface covered in sharp, uneven plates like armor. Symbols marked its hull, ones Daniel didn't recognize, but that gave off a cold, unfriendly energy. A voice whispered behind him. That's a Torkai ship. Daniel turned slightly. Torkai? Never heard of them. They're from the edge of known space. No official contact. Rumors say they're mercenaries. Hunters. Daniel felt a chill. He wasn't the kind to believe scary stories, but the ship definitely looked like it had seen battle. Deep scorch marks ran along its side. This wasn't a diplomatic vessel. It looked like it had crawled out of a war. The airlock doors began to hiss open. Everyone braced themselves. Security raised their weapons. Daniel found himself holding his breath. A tall figure stepped through, ducking under the doorway. It was massive, well over 2 meters tall, with dark bronze skin covered in fine scales that shimmered under the lights. Its face was narrow, with eyes like molten gold, vertical pupils locked on each human in the room. The alien wore damaged armor with deep scratches and faded insignias. At its neck, a small translation device blinked. No weapons, the alien said in a deep, gravelly voice. Need help. No one spoke. The alien knelt, lowering itself slowly to appear less threatening. Despite its size and reputation, its posture was careful, almost humble. I am Guardian Torval of the fallen hold of Strenkais, it said. I carry future. I carry hope. Daniel stepped forward, sensing something beyond the surface. Torval reached into a pouch and gently removed an object. It was round, leathery, and covered in earth-toned patterns. It wasn't a weapon. It was an egg. Daniel's eyes widened. More eggs on ship. 11. Torval continued. Weak. Need care. No time. A murmur spread through the gathered staff and soldiers. The security chief frowned. Why Earth? Why here? You've never contacted us before. Torval looked at Daniel, then at the others. We observe. Long time. Many species fear us. But humans care. Not just for own kind. You care for young. You protect small ones. Daniel felt something stir inside him. The alien's voice was emotionless, but its eyes held something raw. Desperation. We came, Torval said softly, because you are only ones who might help. The room fell silent. Daniel moved closer, slowly reaching for the egg. May I? The alien nodded, gently placing the egg in Daniel's hands. It was surprisingly heavy and only faintly warm. Daniel felt a subtle vibration, a weak flutter of life within. They're fading, he said quietly. We need to act fast. Medical bay is upstairs, the security chief muttered. But we're not set up for alien incubation. We'll adapt, Daniel replied. We have to. He looked up at Torval. We'll need to bring the others. Can you retrieve them? The alien stood. Yes, but we hurry. As they prepared to transport the eggs, Daniel felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, not just the egg in his arms, but the future it represented. He didn't know what the days ahead would bring. He only knew one thing for certain. These weren't invaders. They were parents, and their children needed help. The medical center's pediatric wing was quiet, but the air buzzed with a sense of urgency. Inside a specially sealed room, 12 strange leathery eggs rested in high-tech incubators, surrounded by blinking monitors and quiet beeps. Nurse Daniel Mora stood beside one of the machines, his eyes fixed on the egg he had carried. From the alien ship just hours ago, it still vibrated faintly like a heartbeat deep inside. He had seen hundreds of newborns, human and otherwise, but nothing quite like this. These weren't just fragile lives. They were the last of an entire alien clan depending on humans to survive. Dr. Lena Orion, the hospital's leading xenobiologist, was adjusting temperature settings on one of the incubators. She was focused, her dark curls tied back, her hands moving quickly over the controls. We've raised the humidity and matched the heat levels to reptilian birth cycles, she said, glancing at a chart. But the signs are still weak. The life pulses are dropping. Daniel looked at the readings and frowned. It's not enough, is it? Lena shook her head. It's not. These eggs are alive, but they're not responding the way they should. Something's missing. Torval, the tall Torkai guardian, stood silently near the door watching the humans work. His golden eyes moved from machine to egg to Daniel. He didn't speak often, but every movement of his large frame carried a weight of quiet grief. Daniel could tell he wasn't used to standing still. He was a warrior built for action, but right now stillness was all he had. Lena paused and turned to Torval. Your people. How do you care for eggs on your world? Torval stepped closer, lowering his voice. In the nest, guardian stays close. Skin gives heat, sound of voice, smell, touch. It helps them grow strong. We do not leave the eggs alone. Lena blinked. So they need more than heat. They need presence. Yes, Torval answered. They feel us. Know we are near. Daniel stared at the egg in the incubator, then made a decision. Carefully, he opened the chamber, reached inside, and lifted the egg out. It was warm, but not warm enough. He sat down in a nearby chair and gently placed the egg against his chest, holding it with both arms. It felt awkward at first. This wasn't like holding a baby, but something about it felt right. He rolled up his sleeve so the leathery shell made contact with his skin. For a few moments, nothing changed. Then slowly, the monitor nearby beeped softly. A new pulse appeared on the screen. Stronger, steadier. Daniel's eyes widened. Lena, Look at this. She rushed over and stared at the data. The vitals are stabilizing. Something in your skin. It's triggering a response. Torval leaned forward. The egg knows. You are near. You are safe. Daniel adjusted the egg in his arms as gently as he could. They don't just need machines. They need to be held. Lena turned to the team of nurses and assistants watching through the glass. We need volunteers. They'll need human contact around the clock. Within hours, the word had spread. The hospital staff, nurses, techs, even maintenance workers signed up for shifts. Some were nervous, others were curious. But most of them came simply because they wanted to help. One by one, people sat in soft chairs, removed their sleeves or collars, and held an egg against their bare skin. Some read aloud. Others hummed lullabies. A few just sat in silence listening to the faint pulse of the little lives they were trying to save. Torval watched it all with a quiet kind of awe. In his world, strength was shown in combat, in scars and survival. But here, strength looked different. It was gentle. It was patient. It smelled like coffee and hand lotion and human sweat, and it was saving his future. That evening, Daniel found himself back in the nursery, holding the same egg he had earlier. The heartbeat inside it felt stronger now, more confident. Lena came in, holding a data pad, her expression both tired and excited. I think I know what's happening, she said. I ran some chemical scans. When our skin touches the eggshell, it triggers a reaction, probably the same as the hormones the Torkai would naturally release. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You're saying we're basically their parents now? Not exactly, Lena smiled. But close. Close enough that the eggs are responding like we are. Torval stepped forward, slowly lowering himself to a knee beside Daniel. In our ways, this means bond. Deep one. You give warmth, life. They will know your scent, your voice. Forever. Daniel felt a strange flutter in his chest. He looked down at the egg, now gently moving in his arms, and realized something big was happening. Something beyond medicine or science. These weren't just patients. They were choosing their future family. In the quiet room filled with softly blinking lights and the hum of machines, a new kind of nursery had been born. It was warm with the shared purpose of strangers holding alien eggs, all guided by instinct, kindness, and the simple human habit of caring. And for the first time since the eggs had arrived, Daniel began to believe they just might make it. News traveled fast. Within just 2 days of the Torkai eggs arriving at the Mars Orbital Hospital, the story had reached every major news network on Earth and across the settled colonies. People couldn't believe it. Alien warriors, feared across. The stars had come to humanity not with threats but with eggs in their arms pleading for help. Images of volunteers holding the leathery orbs against their skin began circulating online. Children drew pictures of human nurses with glowing alien babies. Scientists debated furiously on news panels. Diplomats scrambled to understand what this sudden contact meant. But inside the quiet pediatric ward, none of that mattered. Here, the only focus was keeping 12 fragile lives warm and alive. Nieres, a soft-spoken lab assistant who rarely left her microscope, sat in a rocking chair with one of the eggs pressed gently against her shoulder. She hummed a tune her grandmother used to sing. The egg in her arms had become more active. In the past few hours, the small vibrations inside growing stronger. A few soft taps echoed against the shell. Her heart skipped a beat. Dr. Abir Tesh, the hospital's newest xenopediatric specialist, leaned over with a scanner. He glanced at the monitor and smiled. This one is almost ready. Very close. Nia looked up wide-eyed. Ready to hatch? Any time now, Abir said, motioning for the camera crew to step back. Let's give the little one some space. Torval, the towering Torkai guardian, stood near the door, his golden eyes locked on the egg in Nia's arms. He didn't blink. His breath came slower, deeper. First of our future, he said quietly. The room fell silent as the first crack appeared in the shell. A soft, chirping sound echoed out, almost like a whisper. Nia tightened her hold slightly, cradling the egg just like they'd practiced. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe." Piece by piece, the shell broke apart, and then, from the damp interior, a small scaled head emerged. The baby was no bigger than a human newborn. Its scales were softer, smoother than Torvald's, and its large eyes blinked slowly in the light. It made a tiny trill and pressed its face into Nia's neck, letting out a low, purring sound that melted every heart in the room. Abir gently checked the vitals, his voice barely above a whisper. Healthy, responsive, breathing steady. Torvald approached slowly, his body tense with emotion. "He bonds," he said. "Already knows. Her." Dr. Tesh nodded. "It's imprinting. Just like Earth animals, whoever they see and touch first becomes their connection to the world." Nia didn't move. The little creature clung to her shirt with small claws, its eyes fluttering closed. "He trusts me," she said softly, not entirely believing it herself. By the next morning, 3 more eggs had begun to hatch. One was delivered into the arms of a security officer who had come to check on the area and ended up rocking the egg instinctively. Another bonded with a communications intern who had never even held a baby before. Everyone was surprised, but somehow it worked. The younglings responded to kindness, warmth, and touch, things humans gave without thinking. But the miracle didn't stay quiet for long. That afternoon, alarms rang through the hospital as a small group of armed figures attempted to breach the outer wall. Security reacted fast, locking down the pediatric wing. Torvald and 2 other Torkai warriors formed a line in front of the incubators, weapons drawn. Their instincts as protectors were sharp and immediate. Inside the ward, Daniel helped usher the volunteers to safety. Nia held her bonded youngling tightly, whispering soothing words. The baby didn't cry but stayed close, sensing the danger. Lights dimmed. Emergency panels sealed shut. From the security feed, Dr. Abir watched, the attackers moving through the corridors. No identification, no insignias. They moved like trained soldiers. "They're not random protesters," he said. "They came with a mission." Torvald's jaw tightened. "Kazakh tactics," he muttered. "Enemies of our kind. They fear our return." The situation escalated, quickly. But before the attackers reached the ward, the doors burst open. This time not from an attack, but from a strange figure in flowing robes. Ambassador Soren of the Scholars' Enclave stepped forward, flanked by Earth diplomats. His voice was calm, but carried authority. "Stand down," he said. "The threat has been neutralized." Everyone in the room froze. Even Torvald lowered his weapon slightly. "Why are you here?" he asked. "To protect a future the galaxy didn't expect," Soren replied. "Your presence on Earth changes more than you know, but the way humans responded, without hesitation, without fear, confirms something we have suspected for years." Daniel looked up. "What's that?" "That humanity holds a unique role in our galaxy," Soren said. "You fight, not with weapons, but with open arms. You care for life without asking what it looks like. And now, these young ones will carry both your scent and your spirit." Just then, Nia's youngling lifted its head and gave a tiny chirp. It looked directly at Soren, then back at her, and nestled in again. The room exhaled, but outside those walls, bigger changes were already in motion. Other Torkai had heard of what happened. Ships were en route not for war, but to answer the quiet cry of their clutchkin. And Earth, whether ready or not, had just become more than a planet. It had become a sanctuary. 3 weeks after the first Torkai egg had hatched, the pediatric ward felt less like a hospital and more like a quiet nursery. One filled with soft humming, gentle voices, and the occasional chirp from the alien younglings now nestled in, the arms of their human caregivers. The 12 eggs had all successfully hatched. Each youngling had bonded with a different human. Nurses, engineers, a cafeteria worker, even a teenager who had been delivering flowers with her mother. The Torkai hatchlings followed their chosen humans with curious golden eyes and soft, purring sounds never straying far. The connection was undeniable. These children had imprinted, and that bond would last a lifetime. Daniel Mora stood by the observation window, watching as a pair of younglings played quietly on the floor with brightly colored toys. One of them, a small, quick-moving creature, with deep green scales, glanced at Daniel and let out a happy chirp. Daniel smiled and waved. The baby pounced on a rubber ball and gave it a proud growl. Dr. Lena Orion stood beside him, her arms crossed thoughtfully. "They're learning fast," she said. "Faster than we expected." "They're mimicking more than just sounds," Daniel added. "They're watching how we move, how we interact. They're learning emotions." Lena nodded. "And they're returning them. That one," she said, pointing at the green-scaled youngling, "cried when its caregiver left the room yesterday. Not just noise, real distress. They're bonding emotionally." Torval, now something of a permanent resident at the hospital, entered quietly and stood beside them. "This is how our young grow," he said. "In our home, they know safety. From the moment they hatch. Here, they learn it from you." Daniel glanced at the tall warrior. "They're not just learning safety, they're learning care, joy, affection." Torval gave a slow nod. "And when they are older, they will protect what gave them those things." The words hung in the air. Everyone understood what it meant. These younglings, born to a species feared across the galaxy, were now bonded to humans, not just as protectors, but as family. Later that day, the hospital received an urgent message from Planetary Command. Dozens of Torkai ships were entering. Earth system, none bearing weapons, all answering the news that the last eggs had survived. At first, governments panicked. Satellites were repositioned, defense systems activated. But when the ships signaled peaceful intent and broadcast messages not of war but of kinship, the mood shifted. Ambassador Soren returned to the hospital, walking calmly into the same room where Torval now helped feed a hatchling with a specially designed bottle. Soren looked around at the scene with quiet amazement. "You've created something we didn't think was possible," he said. Torval stood and bowed his head. "Not created, allowed. Humans allowed it." Soren turned to Daniel. "The Enclave has reviewed the events of the past weeks. We believe this act of compassion has changed the future of both your species and theirs." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "We just held some eggs. We did what anyone would do." "No," Soren said gently. "You did what only humanity did." Outside the facility, a crowd had gathered. Scientists, journalists, and curious citizens wanting to catch a glimpse of the younglings or speak to the humans now called clutch parents. A new name was spreading in headlines. Guardians of the Future. That's what they were being called. The ones who saved an alien species from the edge of extinction, not through war or technology, but through touch and love. That evening, Daniel visited Nia, who sat on a soft mat in the playroom with her bonded youngling curled in her lap. Anaria hatchling had grown, its scales now a darker shade, and it had started mimicking words. It tried to say her name, Nia, in a soft, stumbling voice. She laughed, her eyes watering. "He's trying so hard," she whispered. "I don't even know what happens next." Daniel sat beside her. "None of us do. But we're part of something now. Something bigger." News broke that night. The Torkai had offered Earth a rare gift. Protection under their ancient clan law. Every human who had bonded with a youngling would be considered kin. Attacks on Earth would be seen as attacks on their own. For a species once feared as mercenaries, this was more than a promise. It was a vow. Not everyone in the galaxy was pleased. A few rival factions viewed this alliance as dangerous. Threats were made, accusations flew. But the Torkai stood firm. Their ships, though docked peacefully in orbit, remained fully capable of defense. And every time a message of warning was sent to Earth, the response from the Torkai was clear. Our young are here. Our loyalty is here. 1 week later, during a peaceful ceremony held at the hospital, Each clutch parent was given a small crest, an emblem made by Torkai artisans. The symbol meant life guardian in their language. Daniel pinned his to his shirt with pride. The stars shone outside the viewing window that night. The human caregivers sat with their hatchlings, unaware of how much had changed. Earth was no longer just a planet of explorers and survivors. It had become something more, a sanctuary, a place where hope had not only arrived but hatched into something living and lasting. Torval stood beside the window, looking out into space. A small hand tugged at his leg. One of the hatchlings stared up at him with wide, curious eyes. He knelt down and picked the child up, holding it close. For the first time in many years, the warrior smiled. They had lost their home. But here, with humans, they had found something just as powerful. Beginning.